producers actually suffer from health, right? Yeah. And then secondly, structurally, actually peasants learn how to use chemical fertilizers and pesticides in the production team during the socialist era and become more and more dependent on them when the massive supply was available in the market after China's economy was opened to the capitalists in the 1980s. And then ideologically, chemical agriculture considered modern and scientific, while traditional, so more ecological agricultural knowledge considered backward and undesirable. So culturally, and peasants gradually disconnect the community and the tradition since they just follow instructions of the Tunisians and in the village. So it's a kind of the violence that we, yeah. And then the women try to, it's an action research, right? Yeah, so they, that we adopted to conduct the survey, the research. So they have their own plan. So these are the plans. They try to use bioliquid to subsidize pesticide use, and then to reduce the frequency, and also to preserve the grass in the field, yeah, and use more nutrition liquid to nurture plant instead of using pesticides. Okay, so the steps very briefly, because I want to show you some clips. Because we have produced a documentary, and it's better for let the women speak, okay, instead of me. So, so the first there's a training workshop, to reflect the experience of using chemical fertilizers. Yeah, and then in the first year, there are a kind of experimentation conducted in, to mobilize the villages. So I'll show you how they, through these really observations, traditional way of trying to observe and compare, trying to gain back the knowledge, the capacity to know, okay? So I just maybe, So these are the, try to compare the leaves while they have sprayed it bio liquid instead of pesticides.
这个是没有打了农药的，也没有用那个找叶的。这个是
try to do the observations on the leaves, how actually the experiment impacted on the fruit tree itself, whether it's grown stronger. Yeah.
没有这个口。
叶子也没打。
2009年我们试样的还是不算太成功。最后我就想到什么了？就是说不能光靠从叶子上去喷洒就知道有机的。我就总结了一下要知道有机的话，这土壤最重要。所以说我就觉得下一步开展要从土壤去开展。
So when you try to compare the soil, see, without using chemical fertilizers and those who use chemical fertilizers, the difference, the texture.
所以说那些找杂质的那些肥料是很多很多的。我们还出去到周边的那个村子里，旁边邻居去掏粪。所以说冬天闲下来没事干的时候，容易就每天开着那个拖拉机出去掏大粪。
Okay, so
你看，黄的，而且是那个没有囊性的。
So you see most of the land, using chemical fertilizers become very sandy and no nutrition.
我不是研究这一块的，可是我看了这些图上以后，我就觉得。
Okay, because of time constraint, I'll just continue with okay, so so. In the second year, they also try to preserve grass, in order to preserve the moisture. Yeah, there are actually a lot of good things about that. Yeah, so they also compare, and then they try to learn from each other because of this dependence on technicians. They gradually lost the capacity to not only to observe, but relating to each other, yeah, because they just do their own thing, yeah. So we try to, yeah. So the result is quite satisfactory in a sense. From the ecological point of view, the fruit tree fields become more environmental friendly, like the more grass, and then and also the livelihood. And they actually fear whether by using changing to bio-liquid, instead of the pesticides, whether they will reduce the production and then reduce the income. But it appeared that the result is quite satisfactory, yeah. And culturally, that's also important because the horizontal community relationship also improved through more sharing, cooperation, and interaction, and reconnecting with the earth and the traditions. And in terms of knowledge productions, so technology accumulated through trial and error, yeah. So and more active participation in field observation, and more aware of the health and the environment. So the gender specificity and like this, initially actually as women, Tuen and the two women, they're actually more motivated to take action because of their caring roles in the family. Yeah, later they actually become more engaged as individuals, yeah, as their awareness and social responsibility to the earth, to the society, and the well-being of humans increased. And secondly, as they are already the community leaders, because they're leading the Women's of Cooperation, Women's Society and the Cooperative. And then they have strong community bonds and mobilization capacity, thus successfully connect villages to join the experimentation, also including men. Yeah. And thirdly, and because they are being organizers and leaders, but still they want to always say we are only ordinary agricultural practitioners. Yeah. So there's a kind of equal relationship built among them. And they are also very aware of their fellow villagers' struggle between ecological concern and livelihood concern. So they are more actually willing to listen to the villagers' concern. Yeah. Okay. And also there are a lot of also personal changes experienced by the individual women. They are more confident of the ecological and agricultural and also more critical of the chemical agriculture. Yeah. And they're also quite confident about their way of learning. So this is the knowledge production part. Yeah. So maybe I will try to use a very short clip to conclude that part instead of talking about my conclusion. Okay. Okay.
这个也可以，还有这个对，然后所以说
Yeah, this is how she present her change. Yeah.
所以说这一方面我就觉得说我们应该让这些更多的村民来了解这些农药对人类的这个有害处嘛。所以说我就觉得不是我个人的事，应该是全村这个农户都行动起来的事。所以今天开这个会，我就觉得说如果说我们村大规模的这样做这个示范的话，那我们未来的有这个果品市场，我们丽家庄是第一个的，应该这样说。可是需要大家的这个行动，不光是嘴上说一说就行了，就是最少要强调说我们从行动上来做。所以说，从这个早叶喷洒到这个早扎施肥、农家肥这一块儿，我们下一步就是说，今年最主要的今年的就是说我们推广了很多的草，从草这一方面在入手，看能不能把这个果品的品质再加强，再就是说草 土壤相结合，跟这个叶下场来相结合，看到这些树怎么样？就是今天下午我们要到地。
Yeah. Okay, so maybe I'll just here. Yeah. Okay, so I have a little bit of the conclusion, but you can read later in the web. I will put this in there. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chen. Next, we have Samantha to share with us the experiences of women in South Africa.
Hi everyone. So I was asked to speak on the theme of race, class and gender in post-apartheid South Africa. And we've just come out of a very significant event in Durban, coinciding with COP17. I was involved with many other women from the Southern Africa region in organizing an assembly of rural women, which happens every 2 years and is a very significant movement regionally that is advancing a very different vision of land and agrarian reform seen from the perspective of women smallholders. So I thought I'd be very curious to spend time with you talking a little bit around some of the experiences of movements, popular movements in South Africa post-democracy. And the reason why this is so significant is that in South Africa, as elsewhere, social movements offer the hope for a different future. They're movements that are organized around a very different vision. They organize poor and excluded people. And so I'm quite curious to think a little bit more on what we can learn from some of these struggles as we move forward. I'm going to reflect on two social movements that I've been involved in. The one is a national movement of landless people called the Landless People's Movement. And the second one is the national movement of rural women. They each have very different lessons to share, but the focus that I'm really wanting to bring to this presentation today is the role of what we call support or solidarity NGOs, and to really problematize this and draw lessons. Before I begin, I think it's important to just outline a little bit of the background, the context to South Africa. And I'm sorry, I've been working 18-hour days since the start of COP a few weeks ago, so I haven't been able to do a proper presentation, but I've pulled together a couple of slides. So Patrick earlier today talked a little bit around the racialized system of apartheid capitalism. We can't understand the movements, their emergence, their political struggles without understanding this system. South Africa was colonized from the mid-1600s, first by the Dutch and then later by the British. This map here, and Patrick earlier talked about Swiss cheese, but this map represents the configuration, the geographic configuration of the South African space, created by a piece of legislation in 1913 called the Native Land Act. And this act basically legislated a long history of dispossession that had already occurred under colonization. And essentially reserved, as you can see, strange, bizarrely configured parcels of land completely separated from one another. Essentially, these reflect the most marginal pieces of land. And this was the basis on which apartheid capitalism was configured. So this was in 1913, but a couple of decades later, people had been forcibly removed from often very fertile, rich lands onto extremely marginal pieces of land, where those black areas are. And those were reserved for occupation, exclusive occupation and use by different ethnic groups in South Africa. So by the end of apartheid in 1994, the configuration of land holdings was such that 13% of land was occupied by the black majority, with the majority of arable land held by a very small elite group of white commercial farmers. So by 1994, It's estimated that about 3.5 million black South Africans were forcibly removed from their land into those little black spaces. Now, given that level of racialized dispossession of land, one would have imagined that a post-democracy in South Africa would have laid the basis for a real redistribution of land. But unfortunately what happened was that our constitution embedded, it recognized existing private property rights, with the result that it confirmed that unequal distribution of land. And this lays the basis for a lot of the struggles around land that have happened post-democracy. Now, under the influence of the Bretton Woods institutions, what happened was that, and they were operating, as Patrick was saying, from the 1990s, there were various think tanks, a lot of policy research happening around post-democratic policies and dispensations around water, health, land. So by the time our land policy was introduced, and that was in 1996, it was oriented to the market, with the state's role basically being reduced to a facilitator. So the role of the state was to oversee and support the transaction of land on a willing buyer, willing seller basis. Land would be made available to dispossessed black South Africans through a land restitution program. So what the state did was